Hey there, my name is Jason Bradley. You may recognize my voice from such places as the Community Solutions Podcast, which, by the way, you're listening to now. Before we begin, can I bend your ear for just a moment? We want to bring you the very best in quality and information each week. You can help us achieve that level of greatness. If you sell something, want to announce something, or try to convince others to vote for you, consider advertising on the Community Solutions Podcast. You can email us at commsolutionsmn@gmail.com, and we'd love to help you tell everyone about what you do. Once again, that's commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. Let us be your solution to increased sales. We thank you ahead of time for your consideration. Okay, enough yammering. On with the show. So look at us now, we're just making our play. Don't try to push your luck, just get out of our way, because we're back. This is the Community Solutions Podcast. It seems like forever, but we are here. We're here to fill you in on everything that's been going on, and man, are you in for a good show. With me, back from the western United States,
right,
out of the recesses of Yellowstone, maybe out of the depths of Old Faithful itself, Mr. Andrew Richter, welcome back.
Thank you. I definitely smelled a few geysers out on my honeymoon. And
yeah.
Had a buffalo in the campground, camped in the Badlands, it was 104 degrees, lost my underwear in Deadwood.
I don't even want to hear about that.
Yeah, the gambling wasn't so great, but free drinks the whole time, so it was okay. Great to be back. Monday I was back to the grind. It just seemed like everything flew by.
Yeah, it always does.
Yeah, always does. I can't believe it's end of July, but just seems like June and July are always the quickest months, I think, that fly by.
It's kind of unfair, but that is it. I think you fill it up with all your outdoor stuff within 3 months, and then it's back hibernating.
It does make me think twice about moving up north sometimes. I don't know if I could take the 3 or 4 weeks off the spring and 3 or 4 weeks off the fall, but I'm still going to do it. But that's the only negative I can think of about it.
Yeah, no, I understand. Wow. Well, a lot happened while you were gone. Wow. Because of that, we're going to take some time today and we're going to teach you about the ins and outs of city council meetings. I know this sounds boring, but a lot of people don't understand, and some things had gone on with some city councils recently. We want to break that down a little bit to help you understand, because these are some big, bold moves, and people are trying to find legal ways to get around the law in their cities. They're pulling out all the stops to try and get their agenda in, because I think that they feel that their opportunity is growing short because groups like us are onto them.
Well, and I think too that we talk all day long about city councils and getting people in there. Well, one of the things you got to understand is how it works when you get there.
Right.
How does a meeting work? What's on the agenda? What's a public hearing? Who makes the agenda? What falls under what's called the consent agenda. Charter cities might work a little different than statutory cities. So there's a whole slew of things that might sound boring, but quite frankly, you've got to know this stuff. There's just no other way around it. Mm-hmm. And it was a foreign concept to me and you when we got into this. Mm-hmm. The whole work session bit.
Right.
About where a debate really happens, and then because you watch some of these meetings and they go by real quick, and you go, well, where's the debate here? Where are my representatives talking in public about why they're voting some way or something like that? And quite frankly, in most cities, that's glossed over, I think, on purpose. I don't think it's an accident that happens.
I mean, why would you invite controversy and conflict into your chambers if you don't have to?
Right. But, I've said this before, people take an oath to represent the people, and that means that the people are your bosses.
Yes.
And they deserve every openness and transparency that they can be afforded.
That's true.
And not just what's legally there, but people, ought to go further than that. And, there's I'm one that thinks that communication goes further than it's supposed to.
Right.
In fact, we'll start with this because I there's a couple legal things to talk about when you talk about work sessions. The first thing you have to know about a work session or a city council meeting is they have to form what's called a quorum.
Yes.
They have to have a majority of the council there. And it may be different in a charter city. But for the most part, it's pretty standard that a majority has to be there. So, it's 3 out of 5, 4 out of 7. City staff typically will attend a work session.
Right. Well, in fact, any time that you have a quorum, that you have a majority, you have to call a meeting because there are laws here in Minnesota, open meeting laws.
10 days prior is the open meeting law. However, I think councils get around this.
I do too.
Because, for example, one of the things that's illegal, and this doesn't mean that a couple council people bump into each other at a park and they're violating open meeting laws. No.
Right.
If they're not talking council business, then it's okay. Because we've had, like in Crystal, we've had like the Bowling for Rocco and things like that where council people all attend, but
Public
they're not
events, yeah.
Right, but they're not. First of all, they're in public, but they're not talking about an agenda. But there's other things that are illegal too. For example, say there's 5 people on a council. One person can contact another person, and that's okay. What they can't do is contact, hey, Bill, ask George what his opinion on that, and ask, Jennifer what her opinion is. That's a chain. They can't do that either.
But they do.
I think they do. I think a lot of them do violate that. They're also, that's just, like you said, the 10-day thing is important too. They're not supposed to discuss any business without an advertisement of 10 days beforehand with an agenda.
Yep.
The agenda actually is 72 hours. They have to advertise the meeting, but the minutes don't have to be up, or the proposed minutes would be the agenda till 72 hours beforehand. So, I personally think that gets violated a lot.
Probably does.
I've seen it happen where somehow at a meeting, work sessions, everybody's all on the same page already. Well, how did that happen? Was it a miracle or what? Stroke of lightning? So that's important to understand, is that you have to have a quorum to start anything. And I believe our state government violates this. You'll see the governor and the speaker go behind closed doors, and all of a sudden they have a deal with something. And so, well, wait a minute. You're supposed to talk about this in public. If that were the transportation committee, they couldn't go behind the scenes and do that. So I think that it gets violated at the state level too.
I think so too. I don't know, what kind of rules they have around that, but I know if you're talking about where you need security clearance for sensitive information, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But
talking about the budget
is...
I think I don't know what the state law is on that. My guess, though, there's something called the spirit of the law. There's something, to me, the intent. And to me, when I see 6 months of BS in St. Paul, and all of a sudden on June 30th, there's some sort of deal hatched. And you've seen it on the federal level, too. I mean, you saw it with Newt Gingrich and President Clinton back in the 90s when there was a short shutdown there, and miraculously it was all solved one morning over, I don't know what Bill and Newt were doing, but Dole was there, too, as the Senate Majority Leader. And then, you saw it happen with Speaker Zellers when there was the shutdown in 2011. Same thing in 2005 with Governor Pawlenty. And I mean, I think the spirit of the law, without a doubt, is violated there. Whether it's technical, whether some shyster can come up with some legal avenue to make an argument. I think when the people are watching $45 billion go out the door, they deserve at minimum to know what the horse trading was on that instead of finding out 2 months later.
Right.
So, but, I do think at the city level, I think it happens all the time.
I think it does too. I mean, you may not see a bridge with somebody's name on it 5 years down the line, but
and many of them are smart enough not to email each other. Although, I mean, you can technically their emails to each other can be requested as public information. As a citizen, I believe they can't deny that. But who wants to go through their
right?
I mean, it would take a lot of work to make sure that that's not being violated ever. But you can't have a meeting or anything without a quorum, without 10 days notice.
Right.
For what it's worth.
Right.
But that's sort of the start of anything when you talk about a meeting or a work session.
Right. It is. And so how do things get into these meetings? Now, ideally, you have a city council that sees an issue with a city. We need a new stop sign here, or we need to fix the ball fields here, or, hey, population is growing, we might want to look at our zoning a little bit, things like that. But that's not really how it works, is it, Andrew?
No. Not really.
No.
The council really doesn't make up the agenda. And there's a couple parts to this. Things get on the agenda for a whole host of reasons.
Right.
Somebody applies for a liquor license, for example. The Planning Commission makes a recommendation for something.
Right.
That would get on. There's a tobacco or liquor violation. That would get on. You're going to appoint somebody to a commission.
Yep.
That would get on. Somebody made a donation, whether that's, I'll use Crystal as a good example just because we know it so well. Crystal VFW, Crystal Lions, Crystal Frolics Committee, they all make donations to various things.
Police officer is taking his oath for the first time.
Yes, that will be on there. That you may see any type of assessment, any type of ordinance. Is supposed to be on there.
Right.
We see exceptions once in a while. You'll have all those things kind of take care of themselves. You're really, that's not really anybody pushing anything. It's more, okay, we have these things that have come up. Council needs to put them on their agenda. Now, how it happens is something I kind of have an issue with. I'll give you a good example. When I was on the Planning Commission, we would make a I'll use a real issue that actually happened, which was outside seating for Milton's restaurant.
Yeah.
Now, Milton's is in what's called C1 zoning, which is neighborhood commercial. It's not a shopping center. It's like a strip mall around a bunch of houses. In Crystal, that's actually zoned differently. And because it's so close to houses, there are some regulations as far as how late they can be open, that kind of thing, just to protect the noise ordinances and things like that. Not saying it's something I love necessarily. I think if you choose to buy a house by a busy street, you're kind of subject to that. And there's also conditional use permits that get, and Milton's outside seating that they have at, say, Louis or Buffalo Wild Wings is allowed in C2, wasn't allowed in C1.
Right.
Now, my suggestion, which did not make it, was to just change the law rather than make them apply for what's called a CUP, a conditional use permit. But we approved it. Milton's is a good business and a good place, and they've been great for the city, very popular.
Yes.
And that then went to the city council meeting after we approved it. Now, one of the problems that I've always had is, where do they debate that? I think they should debate it both in a work session and at the council meeting. They should talk about. Too often in a meeting, it kind of gets blown through. I'm all for talking about things in a meeting, but some things go straight to a council meeting.
Yeah.
Some things get talked about in a work session, and as soon as the council meeting comes, it gets blown through that way.
Right.
So it's but that's an example of how a commission would make. There's also things. That just get kind of put on. Private kennel license would be another thing that would just be put on the agenda. Things like that. They usually get checked out by city staff. But the city council has little say, I think, in what goes on the agenda in most cities.
That's probably true. I mean, city staff tends to run that. I mean, unless you've got a Mark Corin or a Jim Adams who have kind of taken the bull by the horns. Now, I think that in Crystal, Renee used to have a little bit of a say.
Yeah, I'm sure she did.
And she's a strong personality.
Absolutely, she is, without a doubt. I can't see the way Renee ran meetings. I can't see her not having some sort of input in the agenda.
Right. But I doubt that she is the one who brought these things to the council. And that would be the city staff bringing these things to the council and kind of determining the timeline for when these things happen.
Sometimes. I mean, I think most of the time that's true. I know in Crystal, one thing that's happened in their work sessions is they have... they didn't used to do this, but the council now takes... they keep track of... I don't want to call them complaints,
right?
But more concerns. And they could be small, they could be big. And they do log that now, but that was the council that chose to do that.
Right.
And that's, again, where a council can take the initiative to do something. I mean, technically, the city manager is, they're the boss of the city manager. Technically. That's the only person they employ directly in most cities. In fact, almost in all cities in Minnesota. So the council can take the initiative if they choose.
Absolutely.
And when you watch a council meeting... let's just go through what you'll see if you picked up and watched one. We can explain it a little bit.
All right.
You're going to start with...
Well, even before that, let's talk about how a meeting is organized. They go under what's called Robert's Rules of Order. And so with that, the mayor is usually the chairperson of the meeting, gets to say what part of the agenda they're on, calls for votes, all of that kind of stuff, calls for discussion.
Right, and anybody can call for a vote, too. You can call the question.
Yes, that's true. You can. But the meeting is guided by the mayor, usually.
And I would say the city manager often assists in that.
That's probably true.
Because there's certain things that require a vote. City attorney would be involved too. There's certain things that require... I know in Crystal there's some things that require a supermajority, like charter changes. So there's some lease revenue bonding is another thing that requires a supermajority. So I'm not going to get into bonding right now. I'm not going to bore you people that much. But, there's often the attorney and the manager, I don't know whether that's good or bad, but they will often help guide the meeting. But yes, the mayor is sort of seen as the parliamentarian, or however you would describe it. Robert's Rules of Order are not always followed to the T.
No.
But they are the model for kind of how a meeting is normally run.
Right. And like with Robert's Rules of Order, technically the person who is chairing the meeting can call for a motion to be made but can't make a motion. Renee used to make a motion all the time.
And she's not supposed to second them either. But
no.
I think anybody can second it, though, because of if there's a motion on the table, I believe anyone can second it. But I think you're not really supposed to. But
no, and that's the thing. I mean, I would entertain a motion. I mean, anyone who's watched a council meeting has probably heard this or been to a type of meeting where you're part of a group that votes on things. I would entertain a motion to do whatever.
Our BPOU meetings used to go the same way. The chair usually never, when you were the chair, you never voted on anything.
Well, I would vote.
Right. But, did a motion or a second.
That's because I did it the right way. But you would hear Renee all the time say, well, I would make a motion to do X, Y, Z. And no.
She's supposed to call for a motion.
You're supposed to call for a motion. Yeah. You can't be making motions.
And that's what I'm talking about how these rules get blurred. Robert's rules. How many people are on a city council and can't tell you what they are?
Right.
Probably 90. Outside of Crystal and Oak Grove, it's probably 95%. Couldn't tell you that.
Probably true.
You probably have a majority on those two councils, and that's it. Most of the other ones don't know.
Right.
I think, though, you're right, and the mayor does sort of act like that. And usually the mayor will... at the appropriate time, call the meeting to order. That's usually the first thing.
Yes.
Then you'll see attendance taken to make sure there's a quorum.
Absolutely.
They'll run through the Pledge of Allegiance. And you might see other things at the beginning. You'll see if there's a proclamation to announce. Yeah. If there's, like you said, a new officer, usually they get that stuff done at the beginning.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll approve the minutes from the last.
Sometimes that's in the consent agenda too.
Sometimes it is. Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be separate. And sometimes, I know in Crystal, one of the changes they made after all the fiascos in 2014 was approval of the agenda.
Right.
Let's approve the agenda. Let's not argue about it later.
Yeah.
Let's approve the agenda now, and we'll do our debating after that. So that's something I know that the council that was voted in that took office in January of 2015 kind of... I know what they did was they modeled it after the legislature. You would make the rules that the legislature is going to follow for that session. Yeah. And they did that for the 15 to 17. I'm not sure if they I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
But and they did a whole different thing in Crystal. How something gets on the agenda. Council person wants something talked about at a work session. There's a process to do that now, which was unclear before that, I thought. I spent 5-6 years asking, who makes the agenda? How did this get on here? Who decided to talk about Green Step? And who put solar panels? We never really got a straight answer.
Right.
It was kind of, I don't know. It just, I guess it was like the filling in a Twinkie. It was just born there. But yeah, approval of the agenda is important. And then they jump into the consent agenda, which is something that... really needs some defining in a lot of cities.
I think that is one of the most misused parts of a city council.
And in many places, they're not even read out. You don't even... Nobody even... I know in Crystal, they have to read the consent agenda. And it's important to know, too, that anybody can request something be pulled out of there. A council member... And it's not debatable.
Right.
Part of Robert's rules, if anybody wants to pull... But what's supposed to be in the consent agenda... I love how they call it routine and non-controversial in nature.
Right.
By whose definition, I don't know. But it's supposed to be things like... we got a donation from blah, blah, blah toward the Crystal Frolics. So-and-so resigned from this commission. It's supposed to be... sometimes approval of the minutes will be in there. Again, somebody can request to have that pulled out. Things like that. There may be... license renewals would be something if it's just a renewal of somebody who's been there already, but technically they're supposed to have that actually put in there,
right?
Which is again, if okay, so and so renewed their liquor license, great, all right. So that's the kind of stuff that's supposed to be in there. Some spending can be in there.
It's capped though, isn't it?
In Crystal it's capped,
Yeah.
but I don't know that it's capped anywhere else. Like Crystal often puts payroll in their consent agenda.
Okay.
They didn't used to. They do now. And I think that was another change made so that people know that their tax dollars are going somewhere, and it's spelled out. It's not on page 271 of the budget, But I mean, those are the types of things that are supposed to be there. There's a whole host of things that aren't supposed to be there,
right?
And I suspect that again, that's being violated, or at least the spirit is being violated.
Now, I just showed you the debacle that went down in St. Louis Park.
You did show me that.
Oh, my word. So we have... This happened on the 17th of July. We did a couple podcasts ago about this, where they wanted to change the minimum age to buy tobacco to 21. They had a first reading of the ordinance that passed 6-1. They were going to have a second reading of the ordinance on the 17th. Now, when you think of a reading of an ordinance, that somebody would read it so that it was heard, so that it could be discussed, so that the public could come and talk about it. And I went in advance of this meeting and was looking for the item in the agenda and thought, oh, they pulled it. They're not going to do it. It's not in the agenda. And then I scrolled down a little further and I found that, oh no, it's in the consent agenda. So they are going to implement a new ordinance that has heavy fines and penalties and restricts merchants, and it's in the consent agenda. Now, okay, in a moment we'll tell you exactly how a consent agenda is handled, but we had a 23-minute meeting that was an EDA meeting and a council meeting. Sometimes a council meeting can go well over an hour. The meeting
I've seen EDA meetings go an hour.
The meeting wasn't even in the council chambers. It was in some side room. I mean, this is nefarious stuff, people. And they spent more time on approval of minutes than the 20 seconds that it took to pass this new ordinance. They did not mention the ordinance. They did not read the ordinance. And so I went to the charter in St. Louis Park, and it said that the second reading of an ordinance must be read aloud, but can be dispensed with if it is a unanimous vote of people of the council members that attend that meeting.
So technically, that didn't happen.
Technically, that didn't happen because they decided before the meeting it was going to be in the consent agenda.
Or the city manager put it in the consent agenda.
Either way, it's a violation of their charter.
Yeah, I think so.
And technically, it should not have passed.
Right. To me, the law is null and void.
Yes.
But my guess is, and you and I talked off air about this.
Yeah.
My guess is that they got some sort of legal standing that how are you going to stop this? An individual would have to sue the city. Mm-hmm. You'd have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. They know that. So I think they probably got I'm sure they got the green light from council, or they wouldn't have done this. And you'd think an item this controversial and this out there that they would have covered all their bases. Mm-hmm. And that would be stupid not to.
No public input. The only people there were the activists that filled up the chairs with their little jerseys on.
I wonder how many of them actually lived in St. Louis Park.
Probably 2.
Well,
1, 2.
Maybe. These people are going everywhere trying to do this.
I would like to take a look at the city council meeting from Edina and see if I see the same faces.
Oh, I'm sure. We ran into that with the flavored tobacco. Mm-hmm. The couldn't smoke that indoors or something in Hennepin County. I work at Anoka County, and you can do it there. Anoka County beat it back. But yeah, you've seen it's the same group from Raise It for Health,
Tobacco 21,
stillaproblem.org. It's that.
Start it, man.
Yeah, they're the same cabal of people that can't get it passed legislatively. And on this subject, I mean, I don't want to debate this, but how inconsistent are our laws? I mean, one of the things I'm an advocate for is picking one age where somebody is an adult or they aren't.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying what that age should be. I don't want anybody to say I'm promoting teenage drinking or something. I don't want to hear that. But, I mean, think about it. We say an 18, 19, or 20-year-old who, let's first off, could be a parent. Okay? They can serve their country. They can hold a job. They can pay taxes. They can drive a car. They can vote.
But they can serve alcohol.
Yes.
But they can't drink it.
And they're too dumb with all the propaganda out there to choose whether or not to smoke.
Yeah.
And by the very same token, a 20-year-old isn't smart enough to do that, yet a 14-year-old in Minnesota can be tried as an adult for crimes.
Yes.
Now, how come at 14 they can be tried as an adult, but at 20 they're not adult enough?
Right.
So where is the law is so all over the place, and it's so ridiculous. If I were in St. Louis Park, this is what I'd do. I'd quit selling cigarettes. So, you know what? You're not getting my license fee. And you know what? You're not going to violate me because I'm not paying it because I'm not selling it.
Yep.
So I'd hit the city where it hurts.
Take your ball and go home.
Right. And what do you want to bet? That revenue goes down. You know what happens when government does that. But there's so many inconsistencies in the law, and you can use public health as an excuse to do anything.
Yeah.
It's so broadly defined. So I think these things are silly. I think they're. I don't understand what's behind it. I mean, if tobacco, why don't we have tobacco 50 out there?
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, that's coming.
It's coming. It's like minimum wage to fight for 20. It's coming in 5 years. You know. So anyhow, we're getting off the subject.
But so I just want to go back and say, so this room is filled with activists in their little jerseys, and they're all
filled. I didn't see that many people, but
well, I mean,
the front row of 5 people,
whatever it showed, all the seats that the camera showed were full, and they didn't even know that it had passed. They were looking around. I think it's passed.
No, they were on ChatSnap or whatever. They don't care about it. They're there to make an impression.
Yeah,
you know, they're not there with anything other than that.
Yeah,
it's like Black Lives Matter dragging in a bunch of people from St. Paul.
But I mean, my whole point is that the way that St. Louis Park handled that the activists didn't even know that it had passed. It came and went within 20 seconds exactly. They did not read anything on the consent agenda, and they said, do we want to pull anything out of it? Nope. Okay.
I can't even
Let's vote.
I can't even tweet her in 20 seconds.
No. No.
Yeah. Well, so we've told you what's supposed to be in a consent agenda.
Right.
Then often, we'll use Crystal as a model.
Okay.
Just usually, often it's before what's called the regular agenda. You'll have open forum. In most places, they might call it something different.
Yeah.
Public input time or something.
Yeah, citizen input time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Crystal does that in a work session. But
yes, I do.
And that usually is a time where people can address any subject.
Right.
There is a time limit on it, and it should be.
Yeah.
Action usually is not taken on that, although sometimes it is taken up later, what somebody brings up. And usually there's a limit to the subject matter, a limit to the debate, a limit to how much somebody can talk about something. Although the mayor can waive that if there's a lot of folks.
And it's supposed to be on topics not on the agenda.
Right. And that's something that, and often you'll hear off-the-wall stuff, but sometimes it's very informative. Sometimes citizens can't get, I know you and I took advantage of Open Forum back in the day when we couldn't get anything we wanted. It was a way to highlight an issue without being able to get it talked about.
Right. Yeah. No, I've seen everything from
barking dogs
to cell phone towers are melting my brain. So it really does run the gamut.
So that's typical of what you'll see. And again, sometimes open forum goes very long. Mm-hmm. Sometimes nobody shows up for open forum.
True. Just another sidebar. This St. Louis Park meeting did not have an open forum time.
No,
just saying.
That's wonderful too.
Yeah.
They must have been all heading to the casino or something. I don't know.
Where they were headed.
I weren't heading to smoke cigarettes. All right. Moving on, then you'll get to what's called a regular agenda. Mm-hmm. And often this is where kind of the meat of the meeting really is. This is where they can spend money. Mm-hmm. They can appoint people to commissions. That's always on the regular agenda.
Right.
They like to have the person come and at least in Crystal, like to have the person come and speak.
Yeah.
It's where bonds, assessments, things like that are talked. Usually ordinance changes are supposed to happen there.
Various plans of the city for construction, reconstruction.
Yes. Any alterations to the comprehensive plan. Yeah. Any recommendations by commissions are talked about. Not all of them require a public hearing.
Right.
Cities like Crystal will let you come and talk.
Yeah.
But technically a public hearing has to be opened and then closed.
Right.
And usually a public hearing's always required for any kind of assessment.
Right. And it's generally when they're going to vote on something, it's not for an informational part of the meeting.
Yes. And usually the informational stuff is long before they're about to vote. Yeah. But often people don't know about it until they vote.
Right.
So, and I believe zoning changes require a public hearing, things like that. But some things are just done, and some things just are not. You know, when we came there for Green Step, that was not a public hearing.
No.
Technically, it was not opened or closed. So it's a little murky sometimes when they didn't have to take comment. As strange as it sounds, they actually didn't have to do what they did.
Yeah.
So I know too, when I went to speak against the plan for solar panels, largely because I felt the city was lying about how much money it cost. Joe Sullivan and Mark Hoffman certainly weren't telling the truth.
Yeah.
That was not a public hearing either, but Mayor Adams let everybody speak, even though he didn't technically have to. But I've never seen Jim shut down anything. But if anything, he's been lax with the rules when, I think sometimes he should have been more forceful. But you got to let the citizens have their say and that. So it is. But you will see a regular agenda, and those are the types of items that you'd probably see. Often things with the blue line in Crystal, they have been there. I know the Public Works building debate, or what do you want to call it, about the bonds and how they're supposed to do that was all on the regular agenda. So the regular agenda can last a while at some meetings. I mean, it can last a long time. That changes to the code are supposed to be in the regular agenda, and specific lines are supposed to have, like you said, they're supposed to have 2 readings to change the code. It's supposed to be methodical for a reason. It's like that. Any charter changes would be part of the regular agenda. But like I said, the regular agenda can be a lot of things. Often too, awarding a contract. If you're going to award a contract to fix, whatever, the air conditioner in the city hall, I think spending above a certain amount is supposed to be in the regular agenda too. So, and I know any kind of feasibility studies are supposed to also be there, but they're not all public hearings, and that's
right.
That's something that, again, to me, the law is or the spirit of the law is questionably enforced.
Right. So, yeah, once they get through all of that stuff, sometimes they will break it up into new business and old business.
New Hope does that a lot, too.
Yeah, where old business will be the stuff that they have talked about at previous council meetings. New business will be brand new. First time that they're talking about something outside of a work session.
That's very true.
Yeah. And so it goes through there, and then once all of that stuff has been handled, sometimes they'll have announcements. Sometimes announcements are at the beginning, and then they will take a vote to a motion to adjourn. Second.
And announcements are big too. Yeah, sometimes they can be a long laundry list.
Sometimes they can be. Yeah,
and. Again, that's a time where they're supposed to just read it. And often, too, there will be discussion between council members. You see this a lot on school boards, where at the very, very end, there'll be anything anybody in the council wants to bring up and talk about. And again, that also is kind of questionable as to, they bring up an issue, but nobody knows about it, so nobody's there and nobody else can talk.
Right.
So it's kind of something that I don't like. I mean, an announcement's one thing, but I've seen New Hope do that for 15 minutes. Somebody brings up something, and there they are debating about it. It's like, well, wait a minute. Public had no knowledge that this issue was going to be talked about, and they're not available to speak if they'd like to speak. No action is taken, but they can reach a conclusion right there, and next work session or meeting, there's already a consensus reached. So that happens too.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And just looking at kind of the life cycle of communications as far as agendas go, we think it's important that the community be involved from the beginning. And I always go back to Hutchinson's comprehensive plan and how it had staff generating the idea, and then it went to commission, and then they would talk about it in work meetings, and then it would go back into commission, and then it would come back to work meetings, and eventually the public would get to see it and vote on it once not vote on it. They would get to discuss it when it was time to vote.
Well, it's the old adage of what the Met Council has mastered. Get a plan together and go to the public and try to sell it.
Right.
Not get public input and tailor the public input to what you're doing.
Right.
So there's a lot of that too. And you know what? I got to say something too. It's a two-way street. I mean, we have a duty to pay attention in this country. And so the city council can put out 200 different things. And some cities are great at that. Some cities stink at it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the reason a city like Crystal's great at it is because citizens have made it so. They didn't do it on their own. City staff didn't wake up one morning and say, gee, maybe we should start communicating more. No, it was through election results and things like that we made those changes. And I think, 5 years ago, there wasn't any of this. There wasn't work sessions weren't recorded. Council didn't have straight rules like it does now. I mean, spending was thrown in the consent agenda. There's a whole host of little changes that have added up to big change.
Absolutely. And now that we've got, through the public speaking and saying we're not getting communicated to enough, we've got almost an entire council that communicates regularly through Facebook, through Nextdoor, through their blogs, and Twitter, and
is much more visible. I mean, there was a time where you wouldn't see city council people anywhere.
Right.
I mean, even me. I mean, when I ran for mayor, I can remember there was a fundraiser at the Crystal VFW, which happened to be my watering hole. But when I went there, I saw two council people. One was always there, who we're talking about. Right. And Ann showed up, and nobody else from the city. There's something going on now. You see 6 members there. You won't see a 7th.
Right.
But you'll see a whole bigger presence of people at that and who are more accessible to the general public. And I think also in the work session, them taking the comments and any little thing that is going on that needs to be talked about is talked about at pretty much every single work session. They do that.
Yeah.
Constituent issues, I think they call it. It's, it might be noise complaints. It might be things described as little, but I think it's best that the council, I think city staff can handle some things, but anything that goes beyond that, I think needs to go to the council.
Right.
Not just keep it in too much. I think council sometimes used to be kept out of the loop, maybe a little bit. That's not happening anymore. So, but again, generally what we've laid out here from a call to order to the proclamations or things like that, to consent agenda, to regular agenda. Regular agenda and public hearings can be separated on an agenda too. Then back to announcements is typically how your council meeting's going to go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's typically how it's laid out. How much time they spend on something varies tremendously.
Yep. How it gets on the agenda, that really varies city to city. But
and I'll tell you, how it gets on the agenda, and also something like recommended for approval, that also is fishy to me. I don't like that. I like when the city staff, one thing that was great about when I was on the planning commission is John Sutter, our old he's now the community development director. Sometimes he wouldn't push us to do something.
Right.
He just sometimes he was quiet for half an hour. Let us just debate it.
That's not normal.
Yeah, it isn't normal. John was good at that. But a lot of times you'll see, we talked to so-and-so, recommended for approval. Okay, great. And there's not much that goes beyond that.
Right.
So, that's also something to watch. How much the city council's being led by the nose is important too to put a handle on.
Absolutely. Well, that's quite a chunk. And I told you, this would be not as boring as it sounded on the face of it, because there is a lot that goes into it. And if you don't understand how things get on your agenda, if you don't understand the whole working up to actually putting them on the city council agenda, if you don't understand what parts of the agenda something can just be passed with the wave of a hand versus where there needs to be discussion versus when you as a regular citizen gets to have a voice in the process, then you're in trouble, because you're never going to be able to get ahead of the ball, and you're always going to be playing defense.
Yeah, and I would say too, also for people on councils, I mean, they're not making up the agenda. How does something I want to get on there? How do we discuss something that you think needs to be discussed? I mean, you can sit there and wait for city staff to do something for you,
right?
Or you can, take the bull by the horns and try to push it yourself,
which you should do. I mean, you as a city council should sit down and make rules around that, where you guys drive your own agenda. You guys talk with your mayor and put some rules in order.
Right, and to me, it's all about your oath. I mean, you take an oath to the Constitution. You take an oath to represent where you are. So your job isn't to copy every other city. It's not to rubber stamp whatever staff or commissions want. That's not your role.
No, it's to represent your people. That's it.
Yeah. Hey, that's what I'd be doing.
Yeah. You got my vote. All right.
I can't afford the pay cut. I'm too happy doing what I'm doing.
That's good. That's good. I'd rather have you right here with me every week.
I'd rather be here.
Wow. All right, guys. That's it for this week. We're gonna go back and we're gonna do our homework and come up with a great show for you next week. But if you're out there and you hear about something crazy going on in your city, or if you want to run for an office, you want to step into a commission, you have questions, you email us. And you can do that at commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. And keep us in the loop. We'd love to help you out. Also, we would love to just keep in touch with you about what's going on in your area from a little bigger scale. I mean, we would love to come and talk to your groups. If you have groups that you want to get more involved and to have a say, to organize a little bit, email us as well. Our blog, if you want to listen to this podcast, if you want to see what we're writing about things, COMMsolutionsMN.com. And for Andrew Richter, this is Jason Bradley. We're going to see you again this time next week. So take care and farewell.
If I get too caught up